How to know whether you're procrastinating because you're lazy or because there is something else hiding behind procrastination. More in today's video. Recently, I worked with a client who was a medical student in her last year of medicine. She had only one exam left in order to finish her studies and become a doctor. However, although she had already passed almost 50 exams, she couldn't study for the last exam. She kept procrastinating whenever it was time to study, and in the end, she was not studying enough. As the deadline was approaching, as her exam date was approaching, she started panicking. She contacted me and she told me, I need to start being productive as soon as possible, otherwise I'm risking failing this exam and risking not getting my medical diploma. And if I don't get my medical degree, I will not be able to work as a doctor. In today's video, I will first of all explain what was the reason behind her procrastination and also how I helped her solve this problem. Hi, I have a PhD in neuroscience, and on the channel Neuroproductivity, we talk about becoming more productive using principles of neuroscience. Today's video, I'm going to talk about how one of my clients was procrastinating when she was supposed to study for her last exam, how this was risking her losing her medical diploma and never becoming a doctor. I will explain what was the reason behind this procrastination and how we managed to solve this problem. Now, before I start, I want to ask you, do you have something important that you should work on, but you keep procrastinating? Write me the comments down below and I will reply telling you what you should do. Let's go back to my client. So she was a medical student, she was studying for over 5 years, and now after having passed so many exams, she had only one exam left. However, she couldn't study. She kept procrastinating. Let's say in the morning she sits down to study, but then she decides to go and check her phone, and then she would be checking her phone. Then she will go back to studying, she would study a little bit, and then she would decide to walk her dog. Although it was not time to walk her dog, she already did it in the morning. However, she wanted to do it again. Then she would come back, say, okay, now it's time to study. But instead of studying, she would go and start cooking something. Basically, because she kept procrastinating on studying, she was not studying enough during the day, and she was not managing to keep up with everything she was supposed to prepare for the exam. And she was very worried because she could take that exam only twice. So it was now first date, and then 2 weeks after she could take it again. However, she really didn't want to risk failing the first time because then she would only have 2 weeks to prepare it for the second one. So she was really stressed. She wanted to pass that exam. And she told me, and I figured myself, she told me, I already passed so many exams and I don't know why am I procrastinating now. And I thought the same. She was a good student because otherwise she wouldn't be able to get to the very last exam in medicine. So I was like, something is blocking her. Something is going on. And then I asked her, are you afraid what could happen if you fail that exam? And then I asked her, what happens when you sit down to study? She tells me, I get very nervous and stressed out, and then I cannot focus, so I start procrastinating. And I told her that is completely normal because you are under a lot of pressure. So it's your last exam. You're afraid that after having invested all this effort, you might now ruin everything if you don't pass this last exam. And that's when we are stressed and we are under a lot of pressure. Our brain wants us to get some relief from that pressure. So whenever she would sit down to study, that would remind her of the potential fail, and that's when she would get stressed out, and the brain would in order to reduce this stress, the brain would make her change the task. Because when we are walking our dog, when we are cooking, when we are eating, we are not thinking about failing an exam, right? We are thinking about walking our dog, we are thinking about eating, we are thinking about food. We are not thinking about this very stressful situation. However, when we sit down, that's when the reality is going to hit us. When we sit down to study, we're going to get reminded, hey, you might fail your exam. This is going to trigger our brain saying, okay, I need to reduce this stress. I'm just going to make her do something else. And that is when oftentimes we procrastinate when we are under stress. So oftentimes people procrastinate when they're supposed to be working super hard because potential failure makes them stressed out. And when potential failure stresses you out a lot, the brain wants you to switch to another task so that you would basically forget about what's going on. Basically, the brain wants you to be delusional. However, this doesn't work in the long long run, because if we don't work on our goals, we are eventually going to fail. And when we fail, then we feel unhappy. And it was the same for my client. Yes, she would get a relief from stress that would last in the moment. However, in the long run, if she was not to study and start studying seriously, she was risking failing her medical studies and never being able to become a doctor. And that's very serious. So now that we understand that sometimes we procrastinate when we are under pressure and stress because our brain wants to get some relief from the stress. So the brain makes us do something else so that we would forget about the stress. How to solve this problem? In case of my client, she was afraid that she would fail her last exam. However, that was very unlikely because she already passed over 50 exams. So if you pass 50 exams, what are the chances to fail the last one? Were very low. However, when we are under stress, we tend to forget about that. So we tend to forget everything that we achieved so far, especially people who are perfectionists and who are high achievers. They're really critical towards themselves. So then we tend to forget in those situations everything that we have achieved so far. We are just focused on this exam. It was the same for her. She forgot about all the exams she already passed. She was just thinking about this one and the potential of failing this one. That is why I told her to take a piece of paper and to write on this paper 51 out of 52, which meant that she already passed 51 out of 52 exams. She was supposed to take this and put it next to her desk. So she had to write it on a piece of paper and put it next to her desk. In that way, whenever she would sit down and she would get stressed out about whether she would fail an exam, she had a visual reminder of everything that she had achieved so far to remind her that it's very unlikely to fail the exam. And this was actually her new stress relief. So by having this paper that reminded her of how unlikely it is to fail the last exam, her brain would relax. Before, what would the brain do in order to reduce the stress? The brain would make her change tasks. But in this way, we prevented this from happening because she had another stress relief, and that stress relief was her reminder that she already achieved a lot. And if you think you're procrastinating because you are afraid of failing, you can also make a visual reminder of everything you have achieved so far. Put it somewhere visible, somewhere where you're working, and this is going to help your brain stop thinking about failure and actually think about everything you achieved so far, and that is why the brain is not going to sabotage you anymore. And if you're serious about becoming more productive and stop procrastinating, then you might be a good fit for the program Neuroproductivity. In the program, we work one-on-one. You tell me what are some of the goals you would like to achieve and what are some of the problems you are facing right now, and I help you become more productive using principles of neuroscience. To see if you're a good candidate, you should schedule a discovery call with me that is for free. You can find the link for the call in the description down below. You just click on that link and you schedule a 30 minutes consultation where we are going to see whether you would be a good candidate for the program Neuroproductivity and how we could proceed. To summarize this video, my client couldn't focus on studying for her last exam because she was afraid of failing it. In order to solve this problem, she had to make a visual reminder of all the exams she already passed. So next time she would sit down to study, instead of thinking about failing and failure, she would be reminded of everything she has done so far, and then her brain knew that it's actually very unlikely to fail the last exam. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you in some of my future videos. Thank you for watching.